So, Mr. Mayor,
My supervisor has made sure that we have these cool clickers to use for the polling tonight. So if you just press 1 or 2 A or B, a light should pop
Thank
up
you.
and it'll get us hooked up to the receiver, which my colleague has on her computer.
You want us to push it
You want us to
now?
do it now?
Yeah, it sounds like it.
Yeah, and it should just show you, it'll show you a cancel sign, because I have a question right now,
Okay.
but if it shows you a dead battery sign, let us know so we can.
Circle with a line through it.
Okay, the circle
the
of the line
cancel.
means that it doesn't wait, it just doesn't see a question.
Oh,
And the
so
light goes
So
out.
it's like me, okay.
now we know.
So they're going to be joining as well,
Excellent,
the two
okay.
gentlemen over there
And
for,
if I could get your sign-ins, when the signage that was gone around the table, that'd be awesome.
So this is public meeting law training. It's required by the state of Oregon now. So you guys are on the planning commission.
Us on the table if you want. Please.
We don't
won't bite.
bite.
Speak for yourself.
All right.
All right, we'll share.
You're pressing the button again, aren't you?
They didn't want to sit on my knee.
I can't.
Good job.
Dan pressed 9. I saw him press 9.
911. Oh, sorry.
Definitely get signed in so that.
Little
Okay.
RFIDs.
Okay,
Okay,
so I
credits.
missed the direction. We sign in with this?
So the sign sheet's coming around.
Oh, okay,
That one is how you're gonna
I don't
get.
know what my
the
email
full-
is.
okay,
Hit A or 1, and if you see a circle with a line, you're good.
okay.
So let's
I
say.
should have
on
been
my
listening
thing.
to directions, but I wasn't.
Well,
We were goofing off in the back of
If you
class.
see a circle with a line, it just means it's active.
Yeah.
Nothing else to be done. And then the sign up sheet is coming around.
Which is counterintuitive.
I know, I'm like, stop.
Look, John, you're a bad influence on me. We're already getting rowdy.
As a matter of fact.
It's going on your permanent record.
Yep, we got their mics on. Excellent.
There's like somewhere I can plug this into as well.
no, John and Fred have to share. Have to share a microphone tonight. Is that
Yes.
okay?
We're good. We're a
Okay.
team. We operate as a team on the planning.
You guys are in the dark. though.
It's too bad these don't show up as identities so they can match it to whoever.
Yeah, that's okay.
Oh, we just got a
Thank
new.
you so
new
much.
Cough is A, 2 coughs is B.
Yeah.
Oh, that's fine. I'll just do this.
All comments.
That
and
would be
meetings-
hard.
All comments and meetings from now on are not anonymous.
Yes, well.
Yeah, so they're all being recorded,
I started yours.
which I don't know what.
I
if that's
started
state law
yours,
or
so
what.
you'll just have to finish filling it out.
Oh, okay.
All right, am I good to go or, okay, perfect. Let me go ahead and share the screen then. Just want to make
Should I
sure
go ahead and
sometimes
bring
there's
the
an
meeting
intro.
to- Steve, should I bring the meeting to order?
Yes, so we'll go ahead.
Let me do that really quick. Okay, so I'm bringing our meeting. This is actually normally a city council work session, but we're going to do a public meeting law training first before we do the rest of our meeting. And it's January 13th, 2025. And I hand it off to you.
Perfect. Okay, let me just share this online so we can see that. Oh, make sure. Perfect. And you all can see it as well. So, okay. Sorry. Cool. Make sure. my things are there. Okay. All right. Hi, everyone. My name is Lex. I'm with Oregon Government Ethics Commission. I also have Ruth with me here tonight. We'll be switching it up. She'll be doing the second half of the presentation, so you don't get bored just hearing from me. You'll hear me, refer to it as OGEC. It's a lot easier to say than Oregon Government Ethics Commission over and over. Something to know is just that we can't have any recording of tonight's training. You are allowed to, if you want to take a picture of a slide or something like that, that's fine. There's no recording. And on top of that, this isn't legal advice. But make sure you look at the statutes yourself. You can come to us for advice, something I'll go into. But let's get started talking about public meetings law. Perfect. So you might have heard about Oregon Government Ethics Commission before, OGEC, likely because of ethics law. It's in our name. This was enacted in 1974. That was Watergate era. Public trust in government wasn't the highest. So they created ethics law, and then the commission was created to enforce that. And then our staff was also created to help them enforce that. Then we also got jurisdiction of lobby law. So that's lobbyists having to report their expenditures and their clients and employers. And then public meetings law. So public meetings law is actually older than ethics law. It was created in 1973. We got jurisdiction of just the executive session provisions in the 90s. But as of September of 2023, they gave us all of public meetings law. So you might notice that some of these rules, most of the statute has been around since 1973, but no one's has had jurisdiction over it. So there's some of these things people are like, I had no idea that was a thing. That's okay. We're all learning together. That's why we're doing these trainings, to get it out to everyone. But yes, we're gonna be learning public meetings law. So our goals for today. One, you need to have an overview of public meetings law. You're not gonna remember everything. There's a lot, but you should have an overview and know what your responsibilities are as a governing body member. You also know who your resources are, where you can go to if you have questions. I'll give you a hint. One spot is OGEC. Definitely come to us. And then finally, you will get the training requirement in ORS 192.700. So public meetings law is one of the first that does have a training requirement for some public officials. Not all, but a lot of public officials do have to take this training once per term, which Ruth will talk about in her part of the training. But by staying here during this training, you get your certificate of completion and proof that you did it for this term. So it's a win-win. Now, if you do have any questions, we do have question slides. So we do ask that you try to hold those until those slides, just because we typically answer that question in a slide or two. It's kind of how we've built this training. We will try to answer all questions. Some of them might be too specific, where we say, hey, actually sounds like we need to give you advice on this. So we might just tell you, because this is just a training, we're going to have you reach out to us instead so we can give you advice on it. So just something to be aware of. You can reach out to us by email or give us a phone call. Talk about that too.
I also have some business cards from the big
Yes.
boss who have a big-
Yeah, you can always ask our executive director. She is open to all questions. So let's start off though. Why does your governing body hold meetings in public? Anyone want to answer?
Transparency.
Transparency, that is a great answer. Probably a top answer I get. Anything else?
Public involvement.
Public involvement, yes.
Because it's the law.
It's the law. Those are probably the three answers I get the most. So yes, and all correct. So, okay, now what we're gonna do, if you're in the room with us, we did give you clickers. So this is just to see where your knowledge of public meetings law is at. They're not graded, they're anonymous. You don't have to worry about that. If you don't know, just take a guess, it's fine. We're not gonna go over the correct answers now. We'll learn a little bit, retest, then go over those answers. We all do have 9 questions, so it does take a little bit of time, but let's figure out what we know about public meetings law already. So first up, just a confidence check. How confident do you feel in your knowledge of following public meetings law? We have A for very confident, B for confident, C for somewhat confident, D for not confident, but I know where to go when I have questions, or E, not confident at all. Perfect, all 8. That is the number we'll be going for. Okay, second, who is responsible for making sure that meetings follow public meetings law? Is it A, staff, B, governing body members, or C, staff and governing body members? Okay. Now, what determines if a subcommittee is an advisory body subject to public meetings law? Members are appointed by a public and governing body, and A, the purpose is that the individuals will make their own recommendations. B, the purpose is that the individuals will make recommendations by group or vote. C, the purpose is purely to gather facts and make no recommendations. Or D, all of the above. Perfect. Okay, your governing body uses a Google document to keep a running list of agenda items to be added to future meetings. Members can add to this at any time. Is this a violation of public meetings law? A, yes, this is an example of serial communication and a quorum has access to contribute and review what has been shared outside a meeting. B, no, because while all the members can add to the list, only the presiding officer and the chief administrator decide what will be on the agenda. Or C, no, because in addition to the governing body members, the public also has access to this document. Okay, what accommodations are you required to give under public meetings law? A, meet in an accessible location. B, meet in an accessible location and provide an interpreter if requested, no matter what. C, meet in an accessible location, and provide an interpreter if requested within at least 48 hours. Or D, nothing is required. All right. When do meeting notices need to be posted? A, within a reasonable amount of time for all meetings. B, within a reasonable amount of time for regular meetings, 24 hours before special meetings, and as much time as possible for emergency meetings. Or C, at least 48 hours before regular meetings, 24 hours before special meetings, and as much time as possible for emergency meetings. We're almost there, so close. Okay, this one is a choose all that applies, so you can choose multiple options here. What are the written notice prerequisites for entering executive session to evaluate performance, discipline, or dismiss, or to hear complaints or charges? We have A, sent at least 24 hours in advance. B, identifies the public body. C, gives them the option to have an attorney present. D, tells them the reason for convening an executive session. E, provides how to request an open session. F, identifies the date, time, and location of the meeting. Or G, sent by official mail. Again, could be one, could be all of them, however many you think apply. All right, we are on the last two. So your public body has received a public meetings law grievance. What is the public body required to do? A, the public body is not required to do anything. It is the governing body's responsibility. B, the public body needs to respond to the grievance within 21 days. Or C, the public body needs to respond to the grievance within 21 days and send a copy to OGEC. C is missing a few words there. Perfect. And last question, another choose all that apply. What resources are available to analyze if a governing body follows the provisions of public meetings law? We have A for OGEC, B, the Attorney General's Public Records and Meetings Manual, C, your governing body's council, D, your association if you're part of one, so the School Board Association, League of Oregon Cities, Association of Oregon Counties, Special District Association of Oregon, or E, none, you're on your own. Perfect. We got the hard part out of the way. So we won't have to answer that many questions again in a row. Makes it a little easier. We're going to start off with accountability. So who's responsible for public meetings law, making sure we're complying with it? And if you might be thinking, well, that was one of the first questions. You might think, yeah, I know who it is. But by statute, it's the governing body members who are individually responsible for making sure that public meetings law is followed. This is regardless of whether you have staff support on any of the tasks. Staff are not held responsible. It's governing body members who are responsible under statute. And you're responsible for both your actions and your non-actions. So if you do see something that's not correct, maybe see something on the notice that's not correct, you should speak up about it, because again, you're responsible for it. It also means that if OGEC does get a public meetings law complaint, it is going to be opened against each of the individual governing body members. And if the violation is found and sanctions are issued, that fine is your individual responsibility, excuse me, and it cannot be paid with public money. So have to be aware of that. Now that we know who's responsible, and you kind of got an idea of what we're going to be talking about today from those questions, but these are all the topics we are going to be discussing. Talk about your resources, the key statutory definitions, public attendance and meeting location requirements, accommodation and accessibility of meetings, meeting noticing, recording in minutes, the executive session provision. So we'll take a little short break after recording in minutes. This is a long training. We have a lot to cover. And then Ruth will take over to talk about the executive session provisions, the grievance process, the enforcement of public meetings law, and the training requirements. And this is also a really good point to say that public meetings law is kind of that foundation. So there might be other statutes or laws, or even your governing body might have other policies that maybe are a little more stringent, but we're just talking about public meetings law today. So just to be aware of that. So let's start with resources. Well, I kind of gave you a heads up. Oregon Government Ethics Commission, us at OGEC. We are definitely here to help you, both the staff and our website. On our website, we actually have a section dedicated to public meetings law. We're constantly updating that with information and resources. You can also sign up for additional trainings. We're giving public meetings law trainings every week. So if you ever think you need a refresher on that, definitely sign up. We have them available through April of this year. We also have quick reference guides. I have a few available that we can have in hand, but you can always get those on our website. And then advice. You can also ask for advice on our website or search already issued advice. And we can give you guidance and advice anytime you need it, which can only give advice on future or hypothetical things. So if a situation has already happened, you've already acted, we can't give you advice on that just because one, someone could have already complained, and two, we can't really change your actions. But when you do ask us for advice, there are different levels, and each offers a different level of safe harbor protection if a complaint were to be filed. You do have to follow the advice though, too. That is an important part of it. And once we issue it, if it's signed by our executive director or as a staff opinion or commission advisory opinion, it's also available to the public. So that can be searched for as well. We are available Monday through Friday, 8 to 5. You can email us, give us a phone call. If you're ever in Salem, also come by. We're able to help. Another great resource is the Oregon Administrative Rules. These are the rules adopted by our commission. So we have Division 50 is all of public meetings law. Those are new as of October of 2024. And then Division 40, some of those have been around again. If we had executive sessions since the 90s, but we did adopt and amend one new one with that October rulemaking. The next one is the Attorney General's Public Records and Meetings Manual. And actually, they just came out. We need to update the screenshot. We've tried to. PowerPoint just really hates us right now. It happens. But they did just come out with their 2024 version. So it actually is in a PDF form now. You don't have to just Control F through the website. It's actually a PDF. You can also order a hard copy if you'd like that. But it does have all the 2023 legislative session updates. But we really do recommend this. It has scripts, it has some checklists. We'll especially talk about that in the executive session section, but it's a resource we use every day. So definitely recommend that. Now let's move into when we need to hold a public meeting. So answer seems pretty clear, but we can look at the definitions within the statute to know when we need to hold those public meetings. Starting with, what is a meeting? Well, public meetings law defines a meeting as the convening of a governing body of a public body for which a quorum is required in order to make a decision or to deliberate toward a decision on any matter. So we're going to break down all of these terms, but we're not going to start with number one. We're going to start with number 3, public body. So this one's a pretty broad definition, but it's the state, any regional council, county, city, or district, or any municipal or public corporation. Can also include any agency of those bodies. So boards, departments, commissions, councils, bureaus, committees, any of those. A really good gauge is if like a state constitution, statute, administrative rule, order, something like that created it, it's probably a public body. But a single public official, such as the governor, not a public body under public meetings law. So if we know public body, then we can figure out what governing body is. Because a governing body is 2 or more members of any public body that have the authority to make decisions for or recommendations to a public body on policy and administration. Once again, though, if we have a department headed by an individual public official, not a governing body. So in our example at OGEC, our commission, the actual volunteer commission, governing body. The agency itself is the public body. School board, governing body, school district, public body, city council, governing body, city, public body. Kind of what we're looking at there. But there are 2 types of governing bodies here. Decision-making and advisory bodies. Both still have roles on the public body's policy or administration. Kind of said what they are in their names, but the decision-making bodies have the power, decision-making authority, right? They have the power to exercise governmental power and act behalf of the public body. So that would be city councils, county commissions, planning commissions, school boards, fire district boards, all of those. Advisory boards, a little bit trickier. So they're going to be formed by a public body or governing body. Their purpose is to provide recommendations on policy or administration, and those recommendations are going to be made by group or vote. And what's really important here is a lot of times other public bodies or governing bodies will make things like subcommittees and do this where they're going to make recommendations, they're going to make them by group or vote, and they don't realize that they're making another governing body. And that advisory body does have to comply with public meetings law. So that's why we have to be really careful here with advisory bodies, because they are a governing body. Of course, it's law. There's some exceptions. There are some things that are not considered governing bodies. So first up, fact gathering bodies. These are bodies that only have the authority to gather and provide purely factual information to a public body. They have no authority to make a decision or recommendation. But we have to be really careful here because sometimes when we're gathering that information, gathering that data, and we go to present it, and we're like, okay, I'm only going to show this information because it's the most important, or I'm going to rank it because I think this is the data we should be looking at. That in itself is making a recommendation. So we've stepped back into that advisory body category. So we do have to be really careful there. If you're ever unsure, great time to reach out to OGEC. Say, hey, what are we looking at here? Are we a fact gathering body? Are we an advisory body? We can help you with that. Second one is bodies advising individual public officials. So this one has a couple caveats or qualifications, I will say. So the body has to be appointed by the individual public official to make recommendations to that public official specifically, and that public official has to be able to say yes or no to those recommendations without passing them on to the public body to get approved or not. That's where it's going to fall into that exception here. And I will say the definition section is the longest section and it's a lot of information. So the next sections are very, very much shorter. But now we can look at quorum. And this one is a pretty simple one. Just the minimum numbers and the number of members of a governing body needed to transact business. Typically, your public or governing body is going to have a policy, bylaw, or rule stating what your quorum is. But if there is no policy, it's just the majority of members. So our commission, 9-member commission, we have a rule stating that our quorum is 5 members. That doesn't matter if anyone's sick or if we have vacant seats, it's always going to be 5. But once we know quorum is, we can move on to convening. But there are some more definitions, one of which is communication. So this was added to the rulemaking section, which is communication is the expressing or transmitting of information to another person through verbal, nonverbal, which does include gestures, sign language, also thumbs up, things like that. Sign language you have to be aware of. Written means or electronic means. So all of those do count as communication, which seems pretty simple, but the law has to spell it out. So now we know that convening. This is the different ways that governing bodies gather and communicate. So you have gathering in a physical location, using technology to communicate amongst real time, using serial electronic written communication, or using an intermediary to communicate. Thank you, appreciate that. So we're going to talk more about serial communications and intermediaries now. Serial communications is when you have a series of communications of any kind, that's either directly or through intermediaries, that's used outside of a meeting conducted in a compliance with public meetings law. So that could be in-person conversations, telephone conversations, video conferencing, written communications. This does include emails, text, social media, all things we have to be aware of in today's day and age. Intermediaries, talk about next, and any other means of conveying information. But what we have to be most aware of is that public meetings law says a quorum of governing body members cannot use serial communications to deliberate or decide on any matter. So all communications that are going to be deliberating or deciding on a matter should happen inside a public meeting. And yes.
Sorry, I know that we have like a dedicated question slide. I just want to make sure I'm understanding this slide. So can a number of counselors that do not represent a quorum communicate about a situation through email?
So technically that would not be a violation of public meetings law, but what happens and gets you into a really slippery slope is intermediaries. Because intermediary is the person who relays information from one person to another. So if you, let's say your quorum, you have a council of 5 and your quorum is 3. 2 of you are talking about something, you're not a quorum, so you're like, we're fine. If one of you, just one of you goes and takes that to any other council member, you have now hit quorum, you're now at prohibited serial communications. So that's where it's really can be an issue because you can't necessarily control the actions of another person, but if they do take that conversation, you would still be held responsible for that.
Got it.
So one of those that, yes, technically in that moment it wouldn't be, but if it does happen to get to that quorum, it does turn into a prohibited serial communication.
Okay, thank you.
And intermediaries can both be members of the governing body, could also be staff, could even be people outside of the organization. So you do have to be really careful here. And while we do say best practice is probably not to be discussing things that should be happening in a public meeting outside of a public meeting. But also knowing reality, sometimes that doesn't happen. But you do need to be careful about prohibited serial communications.
Thank you.
You're welcome. Which also brings me to decision. And decision, you're like, yes, I know what a decision is. But the public meetings law is also very clear on what it defines as a decision. So it's when you need a vote of the quorum of the governing body in order to take any of these actions. So determination, action, vote, final disposition. And that action will be on any of these matters. So motion, order, proposal, measure, ordinance, or resolution. That qualifies as a decision under public meetings law. Now, there's also the decision-making process. It's a process your governing body engages in order to make that decision. And that's a 5-step process that includes identifying the type of decision, gathering information related to that decision, identifying and assessing any alternatives, weighing or considering information, and finally making the decision itself. And this is important because it leads us to deliberate, which deliberation is a discussion or communication that is part of that decision-making process. And when we say discussion, that's the consideration or debate of the matter, right? So even if we're not talking about things that are a decision itself, if we're talking about anything in that 5-step process up to that decision, we are in deliberations. So we do need to still be careful about that, especially when we're talking about prohibited serial communications. And just again, communications can be verbal, nonverbal, written, or electronic. So we now know what makes up a meeting. What are the different types of meetings covered under public meetings law? We have regular meetings, special meetings, emergency meetings, executive sessions, which can actually be held as any part of these top 3 or as standalone sessions. So just something to know. And then meetings that are held for the purpose of either presenting information to the governing body to prepare for a regular meeting or to allow the governing body to engage in preliminary discussion or deliberation. Typically called work sessions or workshop meetings. Again, if you're in that process of that decision-making process, that's deliberations, you need to comply with public meetings law. So that would still fall under the public meetings law umbrella. Now, of course, there are some things that public meetings law does not apply to. There are actually 3 forms of communication outlined in the law. And the first is communication is purely factual or educational in nature. So As long as you're, again, not deciding on anything that you're going to deliberate or make a decision towards. You're going to hear me get really tired of hearing me say that, but I'm going to say it a lot during this training. So this training, for example, is that communication that would not fall under public meetings law, so long as we're not talking about anything that is going to come before your board. As soon as we start talking about that stuff, we go back into public meetings law. Now you can still choose to make it a public meeting like you do for transparency. That's a great idea. But as long as that informational, purely factual communication does not fall under public meetings law. Second, communications unrelated to governing bodies, deliberation, or decisions. So if you are talking with a quorum outside of public meetings law, as long as you're not talking about things that are related to your governing body's deliberations or decisions, that doesn't need to be under a public meetings law. So, and then third, anything non-substantive. So you could send, like a staff member could send an email to everyone saying, hey, here's the link for tomorrow's meeting. Make sure you join in at whatever time. Someone could reply all saying, I'm actually not going to be able to make it. That's not going to be a prohibited serial communications. You didn't respond about anything about the agenda. You just said, I'm not going to make it. That's a scheduling issue, non-substantive. And there are two also things that the law specifically says are not meetings. So one is any on-site inspection of any project or program. Again, with the caveat that anything we're discussing there isn't anything that's going to come before our board for deliberation or decision. One example, maybe you're on a school board and you're going to a high school program and you're doing an on-site inspection. You're fine to inspect and talk about the program itself, but as soon as you start talking about things like, oh, what would we need to cut in our budget to make this possible? You've stepped back into public meetings law. That needs to be happening in a public meeting. And the second is the attendance of members of a governing body at any association gathering that the public body or a member of the public body is a member of. So if you did a League of Oregon Cities conference, you all went there, you had a quorum, it's totally fine. Again, so long as your conversations don't go into things that you would be deliberating or deciding on, you'd have to save those conversations for a public meeting. Like I said, you're going to hear me say those words a lot. But now that we know all those definitions, we can go back to our initial question of when do we need to hold a public meeting? And that's when we have a quorum of a governing body, of a public body, convening in order to make a decision or to deliberate toward a decision on any matter. And we know we have a meeting, and the Oregon form of government actually requires an informed public aware of the deliberations and decisions of governing bodies and the information upon which such decisions were made. So when I asked earlier, why are governing bodies hold meetings in public? Yep, transparency, so the public knows what we're doing, and ultimately because it's the law. So right on the money with those. Now, any questions? Again, this is a very big section, throw a lot of words at you. We had the one about intermediaries and prohibited serial communications. Any others? Perfect. All right. So we're going to ask those three questions now we're going to retest on. We will go over the questions together afterwards. So let's start with who is responsible for making sure that the meetings follow public meetings law? We have A for staff, B for governing body members, and C for staff and governing body members. Okay, yes, it is governing body members. We like seeing those high numbers. So yep, even if staff is helping, it is ultimately the governing body members who are responsible. Now this one, what determines if a subcommittee is an advisory body subject to public meetings law? Members are appointed by a public or governing body, and A, the purpose is that the individuals will make their own recommendations. B, the purpose is that the individuals will make recommendations by group or vote. C, the purpose is purely to gather facts and make no recommendations. Or D, all the above. Yes, another good one. Yep. They have to be making those recommendations by group or vote to be an advisory body. Nice job. All right, and last one. The governing body uses a Google document to keep a running list of agenda items to be added to future meetings. Members can add to this at any time. Is this a violation of public meetings law? We have A, yes, this is an example of serial communication, and a quorum has access to contribute and review what has been shared outside a meeting. B, no, because while all the members can add to the list, only the presiding officer and the chief administrator decide what will be on the agenda. Or C, no, because in addition to the governing body members, the public also has access to this document. Yes, this one always gets, this is an example of serial prohibited communication. So this is kind of one example of this law was made in 1973, before a lot of our technology was here. But where you can, on a Google Doc, you can comment back and forth. That's what you would get you in trouble on with this for prohibited serial communication. So definitely be aware of that. All right, so we're going to talk about some of the more administrative provisions in public meetings law now, like public attendance and location requirements, meeting accessibility, noticing requirements, the recording of minutes of meetings, and the grievance process, which comes up in the second half. Again, staff may be helping on these, but it is ultimately the governing body member's responsibility. So you need to be aware of how these are supposed to be done to comply. And if you see something that isn't right, to still speak up about that. So we're gonna start with public attendance and meeting location requirements. First off, all meetings of the governing body of a public body shall be open to the public, and all persons shall be permitted to attend any meeting except otherwise provided by statute. She's gonna be like those executive sessions that Ruth will be talking about.
Lots of news about that.
Yeah. A quorum of a governing body cannot meet in private for the purpose of deciding on or deliberating toward a decision on any matter except as otherwise permitted in those statutes. Again, executive session. So let's talk about public comment and disruptions. Generally, public meetings law only requires the public be allowed to attend meetings. It actually doesn't require that the public be allowed to comment or testify at meetings. Again, this is a situation, public meetings law is the foundation. So your governing body might have policies, or there might be another statute that applies that says you do have to. But if you do allow it, public meetings law does say it's up to the governing body and the presiding officer to maintain decorum of the meeting. So you can limit public participation accordingly. It's up to you, but generally public meetings law does not actually allow that or require you to allow it. So we can talk about location requirements next, making sure that the public has access to our meetings. First up, we cannot hold public meetings at places where discrimination on the basis of race, color, creed, sex, sexual orientation, gender identity, national origin, age, or disability is practiced. So we need to make sure we are not holding it anywhere that discrimination is happening. It's also discrimination on the basis of disability for a governing body to meet in a place inaccessible to persons with disabilities. So we have to have our meetings in an accessible location. More information on this would be in the Americans with Disabilities Act of 1990. We link to it in our post-training email for you as well. Now, it's also discrimination to fail to make a good faith effort to have an interpreter for persons who are deaf or hard of hearing if they are requested for a regularly scheduled meeting. So what do you do when someone requests them? Well, they do have to request the interpreter within at least 48 hours notice. So you do have to have it that early. We'll kind of talk about it in the next section with noticing too, why there is now a 48-hour notice for regular meetings. But the requirement has to have the name, the person making the request, any sign language preference, and any other relevant information the governing body may request. So those are the two main things that have to be in that request. And if a meeting is held with less than 48 hours notice, reasonable effort shall be made to have an interpreter present, but that requirement does not apply to emergency meetings. So again, you do need that 48-hour notice, then you have to. If it's less than that, you still have to do your best, but it does not apply. Requests for deaf and hard of hearing services can be requested through the Oregon Department of Human Services. It's another link we share with you in that follow-up email, just so you have it available. And then as for meeting location, like physical requirements, you do have to hold your meetings within your borders or jurisdiction, your administrative headquarters, or the nearest practical location. If you are a state, county, city, or special district group that's within a land owned by a federally recognized Oregon tribe, then you can hold it within the territory as long as it's within the geographical boundaries of the state. So typically these boundaries are pretty easy to know, but if for whatever reason you don't, you can always check with your administrative staff, your charter, or legal counsel to figure out those boundaries. Now, if you are having a meeting with multiple jurisdictions and you don't know where to meet, you can meet in either of the jurisdictions, or if they're very far away, the nearest practical location. In the event of an actual emergency necessitating immediate action, public meetings law doesn't actually define what an emergency is. It just says emergency necessitating immediate action. It's just something to be aware of. But meetings may be held in locations other than those described in the law. So if it's something like pipe burst, you need to move to a different location, something like that. Now, training sessions may also be held outside the jurisdiction, as long as no deliberations toward a decision are involved. Again, kind of going back to that communication of if the educational and informational, if we're not making those deliberations or decisions, it's not under that public meetings law umbrella. Now, for electronic and telephone meetings. So any governing body, including executive session, can be held using electronic communication or telephone. Public meetings law still applies to these meetings. But if the meeting is being held only electronically or by telephone, your governing body needs to provide either a physical place for people to come and watch or an electronic place. So whether that's the link to watch it on Zoom, a call-in number, you just have to provide one of those. If you can do both and want to, great. Statute does say or though, so one. In addition to this, regardless of how the meeting is held, to the extent possible, governing bodies must provide the public access to the meeting by telephone, video, or other electronic or virtual means. So again, it can be a call-in number, it can be the meeting link, or even a video feed. And if you are allowing in-person testimony or comment, you need to also allow that virtually. So again, just making sure we have equitable access for that. And finally, for executive sessions where the media are statutorily authorized to be present, if any person is attending the executive session by telephone, video, or other electronic means, the governing body needs to also provide the members of media that same attendance option. And that does include if any member of the governing body is also attending virtually. Now, that doesn't say that you can't, as a governing body, have any security measures. Maybe your camera needs to be on to make sure you are who you say you are. That is fine. But you do just have to provide those same attendance options for the media access. On that note of media, because after we bring it up, we always get this question. We cannot define media. It's literally in the statutes that OGA cannot define media. If you do call us about it, we will try to help you the best we can. But one of the first things we're going to tell you to look is at the Attorney General Opinion 8291. It actually lists 3 factors of who it would say would meet the criteria for media. So it's actually up to each governing body to determine if an individual meets those requirements in that AG opinion. So if you are fine as a governing body to adopt applications or procedures for individuals, the media to come to executive sessions, if you want them to have to apply or whatnot. But if they don't do that, you still can't refuse them if they say they're media. If a complaint did come in from someone saying that, hey, I said I was media and they didn't let me into the room, we would be looking at it to see how you interpreted that opinion and whether we thought, yes, your interpretation was correct or not. That's how we'd be looking at it. Like I said, these sections are a lot shorter. So any questions about public attendance and location?
I was just curious on that last one you just talked about. I would presume that's covered whether they have to have credentials for media or not.
So kind of. Yeah, there is a part in yes, one of the factors does kind of talk about like if they work for a news organization. I will just say with technology and like bloggers and things like that, that has been the kind of the question that's expanding things. And that's why we get the question a lot of, hey, do these people count or not? And it's kind of a blurred line right now. So, but yes, that is kind of one of the criteria it talks about. And like the way they share information is another one, but the opinion does go over that. So good question. Any other questions?
Anything on AI?
No, not yet. We get a lot of questions about that. It is something that we are going to be talking about. It probably won't happen this legislative session just because we just did the rulemaking, but I do think it's something that needs to be added in because we're always a little bit slow, to add things in. Again, and we just got jurisdiction of this too. But that is something we've been talking about with our team, that is something that we think we need to consider in our next round of rulemaking and everything to look at this, because that is definitely
that's going to be a sticky one for you because there's a lot of developed AI scripts. If they have enough recordings of our voices, they can make us say anything.
That's a really good point. So I will note that to add to the list because, yeah,
Thank you.
that's very good. Yeah, and if you ever have anything like that you want to share with us, please let us know. That was something to either share with our executive director or just email to our main inbox. That's kind of stuff we want to know from people. So, thank you. All right, so then let's answer this question. What accommodations are you required to give under public meetings law? We have A, meet in an accessible location. B, meet in an accessible location or provide an interpreter if requested no matter what. C, meet in an accessible location or provide an interpreter if requested within at least 48 hours. Or D, nothing is required. Yeah, 100%. Woo. Yes, we have to meet in that accessible location and provide an interpreter as long as requested within at least 48 hours. Great job. Okay, so we're going to move on to noticing next. Again, sometimes more an administrative task, but again, it's our responsibility as governing body members. And sometimes we're smaller governing bodies, we're still the ones doing it too. So it's just something to be aware of. But in order for the public to be aware of public meeting, we have to issue that public notice. It has to go to the general public, interested persons, and members of the media. For regular meetings, it needs to be issued at least 48 hours before the meeting is held. Now, to satisfy that notice requirement, the meeting notice needs to be posted to the public body or governing body's website. It has to be an obvious place. I think the statute says conspicuous, but obvious place. If you don't have a website, then you can go to other locations. The Oregon Transparency website is a good one. Any public body can post there. If you are a state agency or educational service district, that's another requirement. And then these are additional places you can post. If you don't have a website, the website's the one requirement. If you are able to, these are just additional places you could post to help the public know about your meetings. What do you need to have in your notice? Well, it needs to say the time of your meeting, the location where you're having it, the list of subjects to be considered, so your agenda. Now, providing this list at the time of the notice does not limit the ability for your governing body to amend, add to, or remove subjects prior to or during the meeting. So you are still able to, if something comes up, you can do that. And you need the contact info to request an interpreter on this notice. That should have the name, email, and phone number of who they should contact. And finally, for the meetings that are being held for only executive sessions or executive sessions that come before the public session, they do need to identify the specific statutory citation for the executive session. Now, this is an example of one of our meeting notices. We typically send out emails and then have it linked to the agenda. So you can see it says the date, the time. We have ours both in person and available online. And then a little paragraph about who to contact for the accessibility needs. And then our subject of discussions, typically much longer. I had to cut it off. So that is an example of what that notice would look like. Now, for special meetings, they cannot be held without at least 24 hours notice. And that notice needs to go to members of the governing body, the news media, which have requested notice, and the general public. And then finally, we have emergency meetings. So in the event of an actual emergency, you can notice an emergency meeting with less than 24 hours notice, but it should be noticed as soon as possible. So as soon as you can. Media and interested persons need to be contacted, and you do need to post it in your usual locations. So for regular meetings, if you're usually posting on your website, sending an email, and doing social, you still need to do that for an emergency meeting as well. And then finally, your minutes for the meeting need to describe the emergency that justified that less than 24 hours notice. Any questions on noticing?
I have a comment / question, I guess.
Okay.
I know, well, I believe that Steve or the mayor posts notices about our meetings, I think 10 days in advance. Is that something? Oh, we don't.
No, we typically will post on Thursday prior to a Monday meeting, so 5 days in advance.
Okay, and so did we determine that internally? Because that's way ahead of the requirement. Does each city just decide?
That has been the city's requirement from before you folks even.
Awesome.
We're just continuing.
Which I'm going to say is great. Like,
Now, on occasion, because we didn't get the agenda, okay, we will, for committees, for instance, we will, do 48 hour. And I asked for that, occasion, that's when I'm getting panicked that we didn't get an agenda up and out. But for regular meetings, the reason for that is to make sure that you have not just the agenda, but also the packet, that goes the informational packet, so you have time prior to the meeting to look at the material, so you can have a better informed decision, rather than say on a Sunday or a Saturday.
So the city of Monroe posting stuff 5 days in advance is, I mean, that's a good thing. We're doing a good job. Okay.
We try to do that well ahead, a week or at least the Monday before, like a Friday meeting, because the same thing, not only do we want to show best practice, giving extra time, so there's interpreter requests and whatnot, but also, sorry, computer screen doing weird things. But also our commissioners, we have a lot of information to send them and we want to make sure they have time to go through that.
I have another
So,
question,
yes.
just to clarify. Does the weekend count as 48 hours?
Yep, it does not say business hours. It is
Okay.
just hours.
I mean,
So,
I asked.
That is a
just
good-
to
no,
make
it's a
sure
really
that
good
people
question.
know,
Yeah.
because
no,
there's
that's
gonna
a
be
good
some people
clarification.
ask.
I don't know if the public assumes that or not.
It's 5
Yeah.
calendar days.
Yep, so, great, okay.
But that, I mean, that's what we do.
That's what we do, right, right.
Yes.
Calendar days, 48 hours.
Right.
Yeah, everything in public meetings law, all the numbers we talk about most of it is calendar days. There's, now that I'm saying that, there's one specific thing in executive session that says business day. But most everything else is calendar days. So,
I asked that because our public probably won't know that.
yeah, no, that's a really good point. Okay, so let's go ahead then and re-answer this question, which we all should get right because we were just talking about it, but. Okay, so when do meeting notices need to be posted? We have A, within a reasonable amount of time for all meetings, B, within a reasonable amount of time for regular meetings, 24 hours before special meetings, and as much time as possible for emergency meetings, or C, at least 48 hours before regular meetings, 24 hours before special meetings, and as much time as possible for emergency meetings. Yes, it is C. Great job. That was perfect. Okay, so let's talk about recordings then. This will be our last section before we take a small break. Again, can be more of an administrative one, but we all need to know how it's being done and then make sure that it's being done correctly. So a governing body is required to provide documentation of all its meetings in one of the following forms: a sound, video, or digital recording, or written minutes. Now, full transcripts are not required. But if you're doing like written minutes, you must give a true reflection of the matters discussed at the meeting and the views of the participants. And all minutes or recordings shall be available to the public within a reasonable time after the meeting. Now, I will say that public meetings law itself does not say what a reasonable amount of time is, but the Attorney General's manual, the 2024 version, they did just say that they think three weeks is within a reasonable time, just for written minutes because they have to be approved, right? So they can take another meeting. They did also include the language that but OGEC or another body could say differently, but our executive director did say she thinks that is a good time. So just a little bit of extra information for you. So what do your minutes need to include then? So they do need to have the names of the governing body members who are present, any motions, proposals, resolutions, orders, ordinances, measures, and the results of all votes, the votes of each member by name, unless the board has more than 25 members, the substance of any discussion, and reference to any document discussed. Let's talk about voting a little bit more because we get a lot of questions on this one. So first, all voting must be done by public vote. No, the use of secret ballots is not allowed. That does mean you cannot vote by email. That would be a secret ballot. We get that question a lot. The results of all votes need to be recorded, and the vote of each individual governing body member does need to be recorded by name. That is something that has been in the statute since 1973. So that's why we do say roll call vote is best practice for that. But we'll talk about, if you're doing it a different way, how it needs to be recorded depending on what type of minutes you're keeping. And then finally, if written ballots are used, the ballot needs to identify the name of the governing body member, and the vote, including the member's name, needs to be announced during the meeting where the voting happened. So let's talk about those votes that maybe instead you're having everyone say, everyone vote yay or everyone vote nay. What is that going to look like where you do need to record the member's name? So it's going to depend whether you're doing written minutes or whether you're doing audio or video minutes. So for written minutes, the meeting itself, you can still have everyone say all yay, nay. If everyone says yay and you say motion passes unanimously, that's fine. The written minutes themselves, though, we'll say it's a 5-member council, need to say Counselor A, B, C, D, and E, all voted yay, motion passes. Same thing if it was, yeah, we had 3 yeas, 2 nays, it said motion passes 3-2. You could just say that in the meeting itself, but the written minutes would need to say Counselor A, B, C voted yay, Counselor D and E voted no, nay. Like that does need to call that out. So then if you're using your audio or video as the minutes though, that means in the meeting, you do have to announce who voted as what. This is where we do say best practice can be that roll call vote. If you are using that, it's a little bit easier. Otherwise, after you say, everyone says yay, then you have to say out loud, okay, Counselor A, B, C, D, and E all voted a yay, motion passes. Or Counselor A, B, C voted yay, Counselor D and E voted nay, motion still passes. However you're doing
Let
it.
me interject just one.
Yes.
For the council, our charter requires that both the council and planning commission have written minutes.
Okay.
So although we do keep audio and audio transcripts and a video and all that, we use it to prepare the minutes, but those are also available if someone requested it, but our charter requires the minutes, and you'll know where it is, your name and yes or no or abstain.
And that's also a lot of governing bodies will do that where they have multiple available just in case something takes a minute, you know, you have some different things to fall back on. So some things to know, and this might not necessarily apply to your group, but just to be aware of, which I do have to update this slide, but this actually started this month, January. So common or union high school districts, education service districts, community college districts, and public universities, so school boards, basically, they do have to make a video recording of all their meetings now. They have to post them within 7 days to their website or social media. If they don't have broadband, they have to post audio. So just something to be aware of. And then state agencies also have to record their videos if they are doing electronic meetings. They do have to post on their website or hosting service to have it available to the public for free. And they have to post for at least 30 days. This does not apply to executive sessions. So those are 2 just specific ones to those groups. But we are at about the halfway point. We're actually making pretty good time. So that's always fun. Means we might get out a tiny bit early. We'll see. But we're gonna take let's see, what time are we at? We're at 7. Okay, so let's take about a 5-minute break. So we'll come back at 7:05, and then Ruth's gonna come back to talk about executive sessions, grievance process and enforcement, and training requirement. And if you have any questions during that time, we'll answer them when we come back. All right?
Right,
Okay, carry on.
wonderful. Well,
Yeah, he was a real driver that was in our office and got fired.
thank you everyone for your attention during this presentation today. I know this is a long presentation and if we have more questions, we definitely can answer them. There's gonna be another landing page for questions partway through executive sessions, but as you've already seen, we've gone through all of these categories of information today already. And for the second half, we're going to talk about executive sessions and we'll talk about the grievance process, the enforcement of public meetings law, and the training requirement. And that will show the directions of how you can get proof that you took this training, which is super exciting. Now, at this time, I would also like to acknowledge that I really thank Steve for being here and sharing expertise by just providing those clarifications about the charter. You've already cut some like 15 minutes worth of questions I sometimes get at trainings where people in the room have to figure out who is the person that knows that answer. So thank you for being here to give us some of those answers.
I try hard to keep everyone out of trouble. Try hard, try is the operative.
Well, thank you very much. And I would also like to acknowledge that Lex and I, our experience and our expertise is in the law, and it's this very specific little narrow lane of the law. So I'm going to be telling you about some provisions of the law that honestly, some of you may have more operational knowledge of than I do. But in terms of the overview, what I can tell you is the whole platter of all the options, and that's what we're going to be going through with executive session tonight. So executive session is going to be any meeting or a part of a meeting of a governing body that's closed to certain persons to deliberate on specific matters. Now, the governing body may hold a meeting that is only an executive session. And if you notice that meeting, or when you notice that meeting, rather, that meeting notice needs to have the specific statutory provision showing what part of what kind of executive session this is. So we're going to be talking a lot about those little numbers in the law in this section of the presentation. Now, the final decision prohibition is that no executive session may be held for the purpose of taking a final action or making a final decision unless there is an exception in the statute. Now, can a governing body talk about how they're going to vote when they're in an executive session? Well, it is likely that as the governing body is talking, they may be reaching a consensus. Everyone in that room is going to know about that consensus, but the purpose of this final decision requirement is to make sure that the public is aware of the results of those discussions. And that's that informed public that Oregon law is set up to inform the public, right? So that formal vote in the open session satisfies this requirement so that the public knows the results of those discussions, even if that public vote just confirms a consensus that was reached in executive session. Now, the Attorney General's manual, which was just updated at the end of 2024, has an executive session checklist. And these are the steps that you take for an executive session. Now, how much detail do you think we need to spend on the checklist? Is this an area where we can
A little bit.
Okay. Anyway, the checklist is super useful and we break it down in detail in the presentation, but you can also check in the manual and look through it because you start with providing the notice. And then when you are at the public portion of the meeting, there's some things that are going to need to happen in public. So during the public meeting, if the members of the governing body have conflicts of interest on agenda items that are going to be discussed in executive session, they need to make that public announcement during the public session. And then the presiding officer needs to make a public announcement that the governing body is having an executive session. Now, this announcement is going to cite the specific reasons and statutes for entering that executive session for each subject you're going to discuss. And that's why it's so important to know what those little numbers are. And also, if you're coming out of executive session to take a final action, to make a vote, and you tell people a specific time that you're going to come back into open session, that means that if you're done with executive session early, you need to wait until people can come and be the informed public to see that decision take place, right? At the time that you told them. But if you didn't tell them a time that you could come back, then whenever you come back into open session, that's when the open session starts again. Now, at the public meeting part, that's also where you're gonna specify if any individuals may attend the executive session. And then you need to instruct the media and the additional specified attendees what they may not disclose from this executive session. And if this is not specified, the media may report everything. And if you happen to discuss matters that are other than what was cited, the media may report those additional items. So there are a few times when news media may be excluded from attending an executive session, and we'll talk about those a little bit later on in the presentation. So then you're in the executive session, discuss only those provisions that you cited and make no final decision. And when you come back into open session again, if you told people there was a particular time that you'd be coming back, definitely wait and make sure that you come back to open session at that time. Otherwise, come back into open session. And then after the meeting, keep those records, keep the, as it says in the charter, you already have directions on that. So that's the checklist as it is shown in the Attorney General's manual. And that manual also has a script for the presiding officer to read as they are about to convene an executive session. And that script is going to show that the governing body is going to meet in an executive session. Here are the provisions and here are the activities. Then address the attendees, the news media, and the designated persons, and speak to the people who should leave the room. Then provide the guidance on what you should not report on. Acknowledge that no final decision will be made in executive session, and state that the meeting will return to open session and the audience is welcome to rejoin upon the completion of the executive session. All right, so now we're going to talk about all those little numbers in the next section. All right. So executive sessions can only be held under those specific provisions of the law. And for the most part, the provisions that I am going to talk about are optional. The governing body generally isn't required to hold an executive session to talk about these topics. And there are some exceptions where other laws apply, FERPA or HIPAA regulations and specific federal and state laws that may require confidentiality. But in general, folks could just have a public meeting about these topics. Now, some of these provisions have prerequisites, things you have to do before those sessions can be held. And Lex has put together a great handout that lists what those prerequisites are. And primarily what we're focusing on here is the categories of the provisions where they've got prerequisites, what you need to know before you go into those executive sessions. Now, these topics that you discuss in executive session, they have to be limited to what's in the specific provision. And again, that's why we're going to go over all of those numbers tonight. And when we talk about the relevant permissible reasons, we've sorted them into a few categories. So we're going to talk about confidential records and litigation. We'll talk about hiring and employment. We'll talk about negotiations, security and safety. And we will not be addressing the less frequent provisions tonight. So just from those four categories. First of all, starting with confidential records and litigation. So 2 sublittle f, this is where a governing body can hold an executive session to review information or records that are exempt by law from public inspection. But to enter the executive session under this provision, the information or records must be expressly exempt by law, and that includes federal and state statutes on confidentiality. Now, the information and the records that are exempt are all listed in public records law. And OGEC does not have jurisdiction over public records law. So I can't go into that in super detail, but a record that could be reviewed under this provision would be attorney-client privilege documents. And using this provision, 2 sublittle f, to meet with your attorney in executive session means you need to have a written record, like a legal memo. Now, a governing body under 2 sublittle h can also consult with their counsel in an executive session as long as their attorney is in that meeting, either in person or by telephone or electronic means. So this provision allows the governing body to talk with counsel about their legal rights and their duties with regard to current litigation or litigation that's likely to be filed. And this would not apply to concluded litigation. Now, the Attorney General's manual has a long phrase that says something like, there are some lawsuits that are not good ideas, and council needs to be able to candidly tell the governing body this. And that means that the governing body needs to have the same footing as private parties who are going to be party to litigation, where the governing body can engage in a private and candid discussion with their counsel about legal issues raised by this litigation. So these discussions can include procedural options, analysis of legal merits, and this is one of the ones where you can exclude, I'm sorry, I'm blanking on this, but
You can exclude media if they are parties to litigation or a employee, agent, or contractor of a news organization that's party to litigation.
Okay.
thank you. So that's confidential records and litigation. Now we're going to talk about hiring and employment. So when it comes to hiring and employment, we're going to talk about 2 sub little a, 2 sub little b, and 2 sub little I. All 3 of these provisions have a lot of prerequisites. So for 2 sub a, governing body can meet in executive session to discuss the employment of a public officer, employee, or agent. And in order to do this, you have to advertise for that vacancy, adopt regular hiring procedures, and if this is for the employment of a public officer, the governing body needs to provide the public with an opportunity to comment on this position being filled. But that doesn't mean that the public needs to be given an opportunity to comment on named candidates for the position before the executive session happens. Just that the public gets to comment on the position being filled. Now, if they're hiring a chief executive officer, the governing body needs to adopt hiring standards and have a position description and policy directives, the agency's goals and the position, and need to adopt those at a public meeting where the public has a chance to comment. Now, this provision, can't use this provision to talk about filling an elected position when it becomes empty. Can't talk about filling a vacancy on a public committee or commission or other advisory group. Can't talk about general employment policies, and definitely can't talk about salary and benefits. Can't talk about salary and benefits in executive session. And of course, can make no final decisions. So, and that's in this situation, not to make a final decision about a candidate in executive session. The governing body must return to that public meeting before taking that final action on a candidate. Now, 2 sub B is a situation where a governing body can hold an executive session to consider dismissal or disciplining of a public officer, employee, staff member, or agent, and they may hear complaints or charges brought against that person. But the governing body is required to provide a written notice to that affected person within 24 hours before the executive session. And this is where it's 24 hours.
24 hours or one business
or one
day.
business day.
One time it says business. Yep.
Yes. So, and why is that part of the law? Well, it's so that that person can request an open hearing. And open hearing in this context means an open session. And 2 sub B has this requirement. It's the law to make sure that person knows so they can request an open hearing. And 2 sub I, a situation where a governing body can convene an executive session to review and evaluate the job performance of their chief executive officer or their other public officers and employees and staff. But just like with discipline and dismissal in 2 sub B, this is going to apply if the individual whose performance is being reviewed does not request that open hearing. So the requirement of the law is to provide them with that written notice of this meeting happening. Now let's look at what has to be in that written notice. So the governing body needs to provide the person with that written notice within at least 24 hours or one business day in advance, and tell the name of the governing body, what's the time and date and location of this meeting, what is the purpose for this executive session being convened, and how to request that open hearing. So the provision requires an open hearing if the person who is involved requests that open hearing. But this law doesn't construe the provision to require an adversarial hearing. We're just talking about an open session here. So the person who's being affected doesn't have to be present, and that person doesn't have a right under this law to postpone the hearing to permit their lawyer to attend or to have a formal hearing, unless there's another law or contract or collective bargaining agreement that provides those rights. Now, again, as a reminder, can't use executive session and specifically these hiring and employment provisions to talk about general evaluations of agency goals and policies. Or just like, how are we doing with our staffing? Can't talk about that stuff. And can't talk about salaries and benefits. That is human resources stuff, and that can't be part of executive session. Now we've got 4 provisions coming up that are all about negotiations, and this is labor negotiations, property transactions, and trade and commerce. So for 2 sub D, governing body may hold an executive session to confer with their labor negotiator. And again, this is to conduct deliberations with the person who is designated by the governing body to carry on labor negotiations. And this subsection allows the governing body to request members of the media to leave. And 192.660 sub 3 is a provision that states that labor consultations are to be conducted in an open meeting unless the negotiators for both parties, for the governing body and for the employees, request that the negotiations be conducted in executive session. And for 660 sub 3, labor negotiations that are held in executive session under this provision are not subject to the notification requirements that are everywhere else in public meetings law. So that's a special one. Now, real property transactions. A governing body may convene an executive session to discuss the negotiation of real property transactions with individuals the governing body has designated for the purpose of negotiating those real property transactions. And that sounds like good news. That's 2 sub little e. So this provision allows the governing body to discuss negotiations with the person that they designated to conduct those actual negotiations. And real property transactions are not limited to the purchase or sale of real property. So negotiations for a long-term lease transaction would be part of this provision. However, this provision does not include just talking about a public body's long-term space needs or talking about general policies concerning how you're planning to lease land, stuff like that. This executive session is going to need to be limited to discussing negotiations regarding specific real property. And while the board can come to a consensus about whether they would want to accept an offer, they must go back into the open public meeting to conduct that vote. So you can't accept the offer in executive session. Now, 2 sub G allows for preliminary negotiations involving matters of trade or commerce. And I always think this one sounds really exciting. And I'm sure that someday soon I'll be presented with a really boring example. But this sounds really exciting because this is when a governing body can go into executive session if they think they're going to be in competition with governing bodies in other states or nations. And that's for when the governing body knows or has good reason to believe that that competition is going to happen with other governing bodies who are in other states and nations. But this provision does not apply if the governing body is in competition with other governing bodies in Oregon. And that's 2 sub little g. So that brings us through negotiations. And we've got some provisions here for security and safety. And a few of these are new in 2023. So 2 sub K, this is to consider matters relating to school safety or a plan that responds to safety threats made toward a school. 2 sub little p, this one's new in 2023, and it is to consider matters relating to cybersecurity infrastructure and responses to cybersecurity threats. Now, 2 sub little o, this is to consider matters relating to the safety of governing body members and the security of public body facilities and meeting spaces. And it is limited to those discussions of the safety of the governing body and its staff and volunteers and the security of the public body's facilities and meeting spaces. This one is also new in 2023. Now, these are, again, we hope the most likely provisions that governing bodies would be using in executive session, but there are others that are less frequent. So all those less frequent ones are still on the handout, and you'll get a link to that handout when we send you a follow-up bulletin using the email address that you provided to us on that sign-up sheet. So you'll have a chance to look at this resource. But if you think that one of these provisions is going to apply or one of these less familiar ones might apply, definitely get in touch with us before the meeting happens. With, as much time as possible to ask us the question before that meeting happens. Now, members of the news media are generally allowed to attend an executive session. And as we mentioned, media can be asked to leave the room when the executive session is being held for a few particular reasons. And that is to d, if this discussion in executive session is for the governing body to confer with their labor negotiator, or if the executive session is being convened to discuss the expulsion of an elementary or secondary school student, or if the session's in regards to the confidential records of a student, or a member of the news media who is a party to the litigation, or an employee, agent, or contractor of the news media organization that's a party to litigation must be excluded to an executive session that is held to discuss the litigation with legal counsel, and that's 2h. Now, that's what the handout's going to look like, but you can zoom in and look at it up close on our website and through the link that we're going to send you. Now, let's talk a little bit about what that individual responsibility piece means for governing body members when you're actually in executive session, because we have two examples of how things might not go according to plan. Once you're in executive session, what are your individual responsibilities as a governing body member? So first of all, if your public body you've gotten to the point where you're in the executive session, you're here and you're in executive session, and now the conversation has moved beyond the scope of what was cited as the reason to go into executive session. Well, what do you do? What do you do when this happens? Well, now you're in the territory of things that are outside of compliance. And what do you need to do as an individual governing body member? What's your responsibility? First thing you need to do is to let everyone know you object to this unauthorized discussion. And then if that discussion continues on that unauthorized topic, then you need to announce on the record you are leaving this session. And then step 3, very important, you need to leave. And that's the law, and it may feel counterintuitive to leave the room if you know that your governing body is not following the law. But that documentation of your individual actions is the way that we would provide the proof of you taking that individual right action. Because governing body members are held responsible for their actions and their non-actions. So in this situation, that leaving the session is really important. And if a finding of violation were to be made against a governing body member, those findings are made individually and those fines can be paid with public monies. So that leaving the session is really important. Now, here's a situation where you're already in executive session. And then you look down at the agenda and you realize you have a conflict of interest on an agenda item, and you figured this out while you're already in executive session. What do you do? Well, conflicts of interest are part of ethics law. So that's in chapter 244. And we've got a webinar every month all about conflicts of interest. And I think our webinar for this month is coming up later next week. So if you're interested in that, we've got a whole hour for you all on the nitty gritty of those. But the thing about conflicts of interest is that you have to make that public announcement of your conflicts of interest so that the public is informed. Now, if you're already in executive session and you haven't made that public announcement, what do you got to do? First, stop the meeting, let the members of your governing body know you have this conflict of interest. Then you have two options. Either you leave the meeting before the governing body starts to talk about the matter at all, or your governing body can table the agenda for a future meeting and leave that item behind, and then you can properly declare your conflict during the open portion of the meeting next time. And this is whether you have an actual conflict of interest or a potential conflict of interest. Any conflict of interest, gotta make that public announcement in open session.
Yes. Can you, if that situation happens where you go into a executive session, then you say, oh, I have a conflict.
Mhm.
Can you close the executive session, make the announcement in public, and then go back into a closed session again? Or because it's not on the agenda that way, you can't do that?
Question.
So the question here would be about access, right?
I mean, you'd have to call everybody back in to make the
Right,
public
right,
announcement.
mhm.
And typically, they're just waiting outside the door.
So
Yeah, it would depend on how you said you were gonna come back into open session. Because if you
Right.
gave like a specific time, then definitely not because you noticed that time. If you do just typically come back into open session and everyone is just waiting, you can call them back, then potentially you could say, yeah, you did, that you're able to get everyone back. It would just be very situational. but-
Yeah, I don't think we ever say there's a set time.
Yeah, yeah, so then that,
Yeah.
so then it might work as long as you make sure that everyone that's usually there is getting that, then you could bring them in public and go back out.
Yeah, it might, aggravate some
Yeah.
people, but
Yeah,
it's so we don't have to call a session later on down the line.
I still might with that one, I might talk to our executive director to make sure that's okay, because
I mean, it's questionable because, because a lot of times it's hard to get everybody here,
Mm.
like the planning commission had a meeting and we couldn't get everybody there, right?
Yeah.
So they had to meet again.
Because it
And
says like, where you said it's not on the agenda, but the law does say you can amend the agenda up to and during the meeting, so I
Okay.
actually think.
Yeah.
that's okay.
Yeah.
So as long as you can say that most of the public that is typically at the meetings and you are able to get them out to come back to the public, I think you would be okay.
yeah, that's
So-
the threshold is informing the
Yeah.
public. Yeah.
right. Okay, thank you.
Mhm. Yes.
And similarly, in the session where you get off topic,
Mhm.
is that something where you definitely have to just excuse yourself? Or can you say, we're getting off topic, and then if it moves back on topic,
If it moves back
that
on topic,
okay?
then
okay,
that's what the governing body is supposed to do, is be on topic, deliberate on topic.
so
Right.
I just
Yeah,
didn't,
that's
I
fine.
just,
Yeah, it's only
yeah.
if they don't go.
Right.
If they don't go back off topic,
And that's-
then you have to leave because.
yeah, common sense
Yeah.
felt that that was right. However,
No.
we want to make sure that that, yeah,
Right,
Yes.
right, and
Jeannie took off.
I'm out. Oh, we're off topic. Just kidding.
we recognize that making decisions as a team is hard work. So those decisions and that teamwork, that's really what we're talking about here when we talk about executive sessions, and that staying on topic piece. So we do have a question, and this is choose all that apply.
Oh.
And these are the written notice prerequisites for entering executive session: to evaluate performance, to discipline or dismiss, or to hear complaints or charges. And these are the options. Did you send it at least 24 hours in advance? Does it identify the public body? Does it give them the option to have an attorney present? Does it tell them the reason for convening an executive session? Does it provide how to request that open session? Does it identify the time, date, and location of the meeting? Is it sent by official mail? So as I'm sure you can tell, a couple of these are unnecessary. Yeah, that's what I like to see. So we don't have to give them the option to have their lawyer, and you don't have to send it in the mail. Now we're going to talk about the grievance and the complaint process for public meetings law. So the grievance and complaint process applies to all the provisions of public meetings law. It doesn't apply to just the executive sessions. It's all the provisions of public meetings law. And this process is new as of September 2023. So this new process means that people have to file a grievance with the public body before they can file a complaint with OGAC if they want to allege that a violation has occurred of any of the provisions of public meetings law. So this process means there are some new requirements for the public bodies. And as we've talked about all through this presentation, it's the individual governing body members who are responsible for following public meetings law. But some of the process of the reporting for this grievance situation is specifically the responsibility of the public body. And so there's a few things that the public body has to make sure they're doing as well. So what happens if someone thinks that a governing body has violated public meetings law? What do they have to do first? Well, they have to fulfill some prerequisites. Before that person can file a complaint with OGEC and allege that there was a public meetings law violation, they are required to file a grievance with the public body first. So that means they need to submit a written grievance to the public body at issue, stating the facts and circumstances of that alleged violation. And they need to submit that written grievance within 30 days, and that's 30 calendar days, of the date that that alleged violation occurred. And they must give the public body 21 days to respond to that written grievance. And it's 21 calendar days. Now, what's the public body going to do? Well, first, the public body needs to post on their website the person and the contact information to whom grievances may be submitted and what are the regular business hours during which in-person grievances may be accepted. And if there isn't a designated person who can receive this material, then someone could submit a grievance to the public body's chief administrative officer or to the chair of the governing body. And if the public body doesn't have a website, provide notice of how to submit these written grievances the same way you'd notice your public meetings. And again, there's the written grievances. Public bodies are required to accept in-person grievances, first-class mail, through email, and other ways that the public body deems appropriate. But again, it's during business hours, and these are the options. And when the public body receives that written grievance from a person who alleges that its governing body may have violated public meetings law, first, the public body needs to provide a written response to that person within 21 calendar days, and that response needs to acknowledge that you received the grievance, and then the public body needs to send OGEC a copy of the written grievance and copy of their response the same time that it's sending that response back to that person. When you do this, you can send us an email at pbgr@ogec.oregon.gov. But if you get a grievance and you're not sure what to do about it, you can also call us because that's something folks have been doing. That's what we're here for as well. So the public body has several options of what can be in that written response. And these three kinds of responses would be to deny the facts and deny that a violation occurred. So you're going to deny the facts and circumstances that are alleged in the grievance, describe the public body's version of these events, and you're going to explain why that did not violate public meetings law. Or the public body can admit to the facts, but deny the violation. So that means admitting the facts and circumstances that are alleged in the grievance, but deny that those facts and circumstances violated public meetings law. Or the third option for the public body's written response would be to admit that the facts and circumstances that were alleged in the grievance and to admit that those facts and circumstances violated public meetings law. Now, this version of the response is going to explain the steps that the public body is going to take to cure that violation. Whether that means they're going to rescind a decision that was taken in a manner that violated public meetings law, or they're going to hold a public meeting within 45 days of that original decision to acknowledge that, yes, this original decision violated public meetings law, but good cause exists for the governing body not to rescind that decision. And here's how the governing body is going to change their practices in the future to make sure that no more violations of public meetings law occur. Now, regardless of how the public body responds, once that grievance process has been completed, the person who filed that grievance can now file a complaint with OGEC. So after that 21-day period is over, they can choose to submit their complaint to OGEC, and they must include that documentation that they satisfied the mandatory prerequisites. And that documentation would include their written grievance and the public body's written response, or they affirm that no response was received within the 21 days. So when we tell you send a copy to OGEC, that's so that we have the copy of what the public body sent us, right? So if someone fails to satisfy these mandatory prerequisites before they file a complaint with OGEC, that complaint will be dismissed, and that is in the law. Now, the complaint process, first of all, OGEC can only accept signed complaints. And when it comes to public meetings law complaints, we would open a case for each member of the governing body in the preliminary review process. Now, this slide and the next slide, we're getting into the part that is not my job. I have the fun job. We're getting into the part where it's someone else's job, and I am not going to be able to convey in quite as much detail how those people do their jobs, but these cases that would be opened for each member of the governing body, they'd be consolidated either at the preliminary review phase or at the investigative phase, unless one or more members of the governing body would object to that consolidation. So what that means is that unless someone objects, they be heard together as one unit. And so our 9-member commission, those are the people who make the decisions at OGEC. Those people, the commission, will make individual determinations about the case of each member of the governing body. And they may do that at the preliminary review phase or the investigation phase. But again, only the governing body. And those 9 people, they are appointed by the legislature and by the governor, and they're confirmed by a vote of the Senate. Those are the 9 people who make the decisions, and those are the people who would determine if a violation had occurred. And they would determine what the sanctions for violations would be. Now, the commission recognizes the burdens that people take on to serve as public officials in Oregon, and they are mindful of those burdens, and they do prioritize education. And I've got a slide describing that in more detail, but I get a little cut off at the knees by having to ask you for your questions at this point. No? Okay. So we do have another poll, and it's about that grievance. So your public body has received a public meetings law grievance. And what is the public body required to do? A, the public body is not required to do anything. It's the governing body's responsibility. B, the public body needs to respond to that grievance within 21 days. Or C, the public body needs to respond to that grievance within 21 days and send a copy to OGEC. Wonderful. Yes, excellent. So, as I mentioned, our commission does prioritize education. It's our highest priority. And most often our commission would issue letters of education or perhaps require an additional training for findings of violations. But these are the important notes that individual governing body members could be assessed a financial penalty of up to $1,000 for public meetings law violations. And again, those fines cannot be paid by public monies. Now, this is also an important FYI, and this is separate from anything relating to the grievance process or investigation by OGEC. And if you remember earlier, Lex said, we can't change anything about decisions and actions that have happened in the past. So this is completely separate from that. And it's important that governing body members know that a person who is affected by the decision of a governing body can file a suit in circuit court. Now, that circuit court lawsuit must be filed within 60 days of the alleged violation. And with suits that are filed under this provision, 192.680, the court can void the governing body's decision or action. With the complaint that's filed with OGEC, we can't void, we can't change any decisions or actions that are taken by the governing body. Now, if the court determines that there was intentional disregard of the law or willful misconduct by the governing body, the court may award a successful plaintiff the attorney payment of fees by the governing body or by its public body. And so the governing body's members could be jointly liable to the governing body or the public body for the amount that is paid. So before it gets to that point, give us a call. Even if the meeting is at 6 p.m. and you're looking at your watch and it's 4:30, we are open. Give us a call. Now, the training requirement is that every member of a governing body of a public body with total expenditures for a fiscal year of $1 million or more shall attend or view a training that is prepared under 192.700 at least once during their term of office. So a person who serves on multiple governing bodies may attend a single training and satisfy that requirement as long as it's during each of those terms of office. But everyone who serves on a governing body in Oregon is someone who is required to uphold public meetings law. So even if you're not required under the law, everybody's encouraged to go to a training. But you all did it. And so that means you've gone through all of these items. And I do have a note about how you're going to get a certificate that shows that you attended this.
So I have a question.
Yes.
We have a planning commissioner that's online, that's been following the training.
Okay.
Has he completed the training requirement? Or does he need to be here in person to complete that?
So,
Yeah, if he was online the whole time,
Okay. Do we need to add his name to the list then?
Yes,
We get his
please.
name and email, yeah, we should have. gotten
Tim's
that
online. Can
previously.
someone
That's
throw
one
that
of
out?
our-
Yeah.
Yeah, our fault.
Okay, perfect. Thank you.
Previously, but yeah, as long as we have
Dawn's
his
online, too.
information, he's online.
Yeah.
I would assume we would add Dawn to the list as well.
Okay.
Please do, thank you.
She's staff.
This is for governing, this is for elected officials. correct?
Yeah,
Yes,
Oh,
it's-
she's
yeah.
staff.
That's
so.
right.
Okay. Okay.
Yeah.
Got it.
Good question.
But if
Okay.
you want a certificate, we'll issue
Yeah,
it.
if you want
If you
one,
provide your
All pieces of paper.
Okay.
See, Dawn, I know Dawn wants one too.
Okay, yes, as long as that information is on that paper, those people will receive a certificate.
That's
Great,
great.
thank you.
Yes.
When did the training become a requirement? Just last year?
In
Is,
September of 2022.
22
when
is
they gave us
email is
jurisdiction,
just
like,
10
I'll
dot
leave it
East
back.
Street.
Mhm.
okay, got it. Thank you.
We were one of
I
the
can
very
look it up
first
on
ones
this.
to sign you guys up.
On our city- Oh, yeah. Two is just 10 dot.
So,
I think
Okay.
so.
and unfortunately, I cannot mess with this slide to add additional options such as Steve, but this is a choose all but apply, isn't it? Yes. So what are the resources that are available to analyze if a governing body
Oh, wait a
is
minute.
following the provisions
he
of public
has-
meetings law?
Tim East, 2001 @gmail.com. I'm sure the city one still works too, because that's how he gets the planning. It's Tim, but not Timothy. Right?
Yeah, so
He did.
I don't know that
yeah,
we
Tim
show
East.
that. Yes, excellent, good. No one chose E. You're all great.
Oh, here's another one.
All right, and this one, we don't show answers,
got it.
but it is helpful just for us to be able to know how folks are feeling at the end of this training. And we've got a variety of options about how confident you feel in your knowledge to follow public meetings law. Whether it's A, very confident, B, confident, C, somewhat confident, D, unsure, nowhere to go, E, not confident, or F. And there's a reason that she designed it so that it is F.
It's okay to choose that, I just want to know why, so we do have a survey that comes through your email where you can tell us why.
Yeah. So you will be getting 2 emails from us. That first email that you're gonna get from us, and hopefully you'll get some information by Thursday this week, that'll have that follow-up email, and it'll have all of our resource links, including that link to that handout that shows all the prerequisites for different executive sessions, and a link to their feedback survey. Now, you'll also be getting an email from the training@ogec.oregon.gov account. This email is going to have a PDF attachment. So if your email cannot accept PDF attachments, or if they automatically go to your junk mail, definitely check your junk mail. But that PDF attachment is going to have a certificate, and it's going to look something like this. And it proves that you took this training. So if your email is on that sheet, congratulations, you have completed this training. You now know what is up to the minute on public meetings law. And thank you for following public meetings law.
Thank you
Well,
very
thank
much.
you. Yeah.
I have a question. How bad is it that I put my personal email address on that document? Is that okay?
You're
Okay.
not the only one.
Okay.
Yeah, I do too.
People can provide the email that they checked.
Yes.
Yeah.
Unless people put their personal because they do check that one more, we're fine with that.
I have my council one forward to my personal one anyway.
Yeah.
So if on different, like advisory committees or park commission or, economic development commission, we pull in people from the community.
Yeah.
Are those folks now adhering to the same law, policies and laws that
If it's an advisory body, then yeah, they're a governing body member and they would have to comply with it as well.
Okay, so like on a park commission or if you have general public, they would have to comply with the same laws.
Yeah.
Okay.
Womp womp.
You can see a lot of people don't realize that they comply with it, so that's why we're trying to
Yeah.
get
It's gonna be
as
very
much
hard,
training as
very hard to
possible.
recruit, get people to join.
Yeah.
If they already have to meet.
And that completes the bingo of things that people usually tell me.
Yeah, but that also is what, like Ruth was mentioning, the commission does add the human element to it. They are very aware. We do often get people that have no idea about public meetings law, ethics law, and so, yes, there is some responsibility when you join these to know these, but we do our effort to try to share those trainings, and they are aware of that, and so you do see letters of education and trade requirements and things like that. Not always that jump to sanctions right away. You're not going to see that, but unless there's that willful violation of I knew the law was, like, I knew the law was that, and I'm trying to skirt around it, then. but-
And those examples of advisory committees or park commissions or economic development, they also are required to have the same documentation of the meetings
Yeah, they'd have to have
that all the
minutes.
public meetings.
Sounds good. Yeah.
Minutes or recordings or.
Yeah, that's honestly, I would say advisory bodies and voting are the two things we get the most. So from these trainings, those are the two things we get the most questions on so far.
Like
So-
a record for longest meeting.
Yeah, actually. I do.
About what kind of are those?
Yeah, I do. If anyone wants them, I did actually bring a few printouts. I should have handed out these at the beginning.
Of tonight's meeting?
Yeah, for
Oh,
tonight, I do
yes.
have some of
Thank
the. So I have one that goes over meetings subject to public meetings law,
Thank you.
and then the governing bodies subject to public meetings law. So I have
Thank you.
those. And then the executive session provision handout. that
You got
I
one
talked
already?
about too.
John, you want to- I'll grab one of these. I'm gonna be in executive session.
Yeah, I'm not gonna be in it. I'll avoid that with like the plague.
Electronically is the best way for me.
Yeah.
You know,
Thank you.
I got so much paper at home.
Yeah, that's,
I'll
sometimes
pass.
I bring in people on them, other times they're like, no, you're not handing out the paper.
Yeah.
So. Perfect. Yeah, and then we also have our cards, continuing on the license, but otherwise.
All right, we get to go home and you guys got about 4 more hours of meeting. Whoa, we'll be
Do you want to
doing
go
this.
grab us a pizza?
Well, I looked at your agenda and I looked like you guys are gonna be in here for about 5 hours.
Be like,
He's gonna move fast.
We can be just as fast as the planning commission. Nobody is as fast as the planning commission, really.
Good night, you guys. Thank you.
Good night, Tim. Thanks for joining.
Good
Tim?
night, Commissioner Eastridge.
Okay, we'll do a 5-minute break, potty break, bio break, whatever you want to call it, break.
I like potty.
Yep. Station identification. I'll be right back.
Text me. You're talking to Jimmy. I'll come haul you out of here. I'll use your dolly. What kind of cart do you want?
I'm gonna need that long lay down one.
Okay.
Long way down.
Or you run a Windsor handlebars looking for you.
Get in the middle of it,
Sure.
my team decided to pop up.
That would sure be bracing, wake me up to the
I got a
cold.
pickup bed back out there.
I'm too whiny for that.
She can lie on it while it bounces down the road.
I know.
Maybe regretting
I know
not
how
taking a jacket.
long-winded you people are, so I think.
I don't know, after, almost 2 hours of training, we'll be pretty quick probably. You guys drive safe wherever you have to go to.
Yeah. Oh, gosh. Is there any
It was
time?
37 when I showed up down here, so
Oh, fun.
at least so far there's no
No,
moisture.
I'm good. I'm fine.
It's nice to have a
It's okay.
reprieve from the
I'll just
precipitation.
make the squinty face at everybody.
All right.
Thanks, babe.
Like last night I was showing a person, the Diamond Lake
Mm.
has a live camera. There's people out in the middle.
Thank you
It's
so
dark out there. I'm
much.
going, what are you doing out in the middle? I mean, yeah, the ice is pretty,
Sorry, thank you.
but the last 2 times I've been on the ice was when I was a teenager and it cracked. And I was like, no, I'm not doing this anymore.
That is so scary, frightening.
Although it was only 23 degrees, so it's probably pretty solid ice, but still.
And that is.
I mean,
virtual.
I saw a picture today, it wasn't Diamond Lake. Somebody drove their pickup out to go ice fishing.
Some asynchronous options will be available.
Have you done ice fishing?
Yeah, I have, but the only time I did it was Howard Prairie down by Ashland. And I poked open the hole that somebody else drove. And I caught a fish. I was standing there and all of a sudden my feet started getting wet. It was like I was on an ice floe and it started sinking. And you know, the ice was 6 inches deep, but we were already had 2 inches down that we were sinking. And it was like, and it was my first wife and her brother. And we got off there really quick. It's like last time.
Yeah, you guys have a safe trip.
Yes, will do.
I don't know. People, I have some friends that live in Michigan and they have like these, they call them like a shanty shack.
Oh,
But I
yeah.
don't think they're really, they're kind of nice, I think.
They got heaters in them and everything. Yeah, I know.
So we'll see how fun that is.
You're not gonna catch me out.
I'm hoping it will be okay.
Hey, I know I can go home. We're off topic.
We're off topic. Get out of here. Good night. Thank you.
Have a safe drive back.
Thank you.
Okay, 2 minutes and we will return to our normal programming.
The normal programming, all right. All right, we are unmuted and online.
Okay, so I'm
sorry.
reconvening our work session. We have completed the public meeting law training. That was very informative and very interesting. Hopefully, we all learned a great deal from it.
A great deal.
Um,
What
I
I wanted-
I
yeah,
did
what?
clarify that they do have online virtual. We did have a choice of the online virtual, but we, as I understand, we're only the second public group they've actually
Oh,
been in person with.
Sweet.
But this is the first,
Oh.
they had a delay of over 6 months before they actually implemented the training.
Mm.
And so you folks are
Mhm.
amongst the very first that they've trained.
Awesome.
Cool.
Thank you for setting it up.
Guinea pigs.
So I'll get everyone else on the virtual train, so I'm weekly. That would, so everyone else gets
Right.
to have the
Gotcha.
same level of fun.
Good. Okay.
Nice.
It's very informative. I learned a lot.
It
Same.
is very, I spend, as you might imagine, I spend a great deal of time
Yeah.
on the Attorney General's sites and everything, just to make sure that we're in compliance.
I
Yeah.
had a couple of oops moments
Yeah.
personally.
Some
but
realizations. Yeah.
Now we know.
On
Yeah.
my part. Yeah.
Yeah, we, getting notices out, agendas, public notice,
Mhm.
what to do in executive session. I think our
Yeah.
attorney did ask us at one point, caught herself and got us back into the conversation, I think the last time.
Yeah.
But fortunately, most of the times we do have the statements. The mayor will recognize the
Mhm.
statement that
Right.
our attorney provides. So
Yeah.
fortunately, we haven't had too many other things
Yeah.
No.
to do.
Thank
Okay.
you for scheduling it.
Yep. All right, we're gonna dive right in. So we're gonna review our previous work session action items. The first one up is City Hall update.
We're in the process of getting some bids.
Okay.
3 people to get bids to remove the existing structure. Mark has 2 of them where I asked for 1 more. It's just so we are in
Okay.
compliance with our procurement stuff. Otherwise, as soon as that is complete, I'm talking with Zoe, the nice lady at the modular. I've already had the Sourcewell contract with the state of Oregon reviewed. So we're basically I'm just aligning all the ducks so that we can get things taken care of and moved over.
And just to clarify, this is to remove the reader building.
Yeah, remove the reader building, prepare the place for the new modular unit, and then finally getting the new modular unit here. So we're looking at the mid-April to mid-May timeframe.
Awesome.
That's not that far.
That's for the,
Time is marching.
that's for the delivery you're saying?
Yes, that would be delivery and setup, correct.
Okay. Next up, library handoff to the SBCEA update.
Okay, we did get confirmation from Mr. Gross Nicholas, our Pacific Home, that the insurance, he had to talk to CIS, and deep in their provisions is that yes, you can cancel insurance, but up to 90 and get a refund, but only up to 90 days after it's issued. So that would have been September 30th.
Oh,
yeah.
So I talked with Roger. Roger has, as of two minds, he's still going to talk to his board with this, but the first mind is that there's board members that want to get this transition taken care of. So they're looking for money to take care of the insurance. You know, they have a price for their insurance and a cost for it. And so they're looking at that because there's some board members just would like you folks, they would like to move this along quicker. Since it's a sunk cost and we're paying for most of everything else, if they could come to an agreement tacked into the same MOU as the janitorial, but tack into it, they would also handle the deep cleaning and other, more extensive deep maintenance, and the legacy fund takes care of the big maintenance.
Yeah.
But if they could take care of that, because we need to use that money for that we budgeted. But since we agreed to pay for everything else in there and it's a sunk cost for insurance, we're not going to get it back.
Right.
If, the other provision that would come to you once their board has said this is where we want to go would be to keep the library, that do not do the quit claim deed until June 30th. But
just about
the
to
June
ask,
30th would be the deadline. That would be where it is set in stone.
Right.
But there'd be two provisions. One is making sure that the janitorial as it's being done now is in writing and limited to what we're doing and
MOU
it doesn't
then.
expand. And the second part of it is that maintenance outside of the basic stuff that we already haven't, like for instance, we've already paid for filters for that place. So there's no sense in, it's not, the basic stuff is still there. They would also like us, if they can, and I said, we do have provisions for contracting with us, paying like Mark to do other maintenance and things over there that he already is doing, such as light bulb changing and that type of thing. That's within our scope. So, or if the heat pump dissolves, coordinating with Stevens to make sure that they come down and take care of it, but they would pay us for that time. And currently we charge $125 an hour.
Okay.
So the scope of the MOU would be the insurance and then the janitorial.
Right, and also making sure that they understand in writing that June 30th,
Is
regardless, that is the date. And whatever happens, that would have to come to you for
Okay.
advice and agreement.
So,
I'm sorry.
do we need to schedule another library committee meeting before we hear from them, or we're gonna wait until they reach out to us before we schedule?
I
the
would,
next
what
one?
I will do is I will let them reach back out to me is what they want, and then I will email all of you, and then you may decide whether you need to be. in a
Okay,
meeting.
That sounds good.
that's
I'll
great.
just-
Thank you.
The intermediary. But
Thank you.
in terms of then you can decide whether you need a public meeting to have further discussion, so you can make recommendations to the full council.
Right.
Okay,
Okay.
thank you.
Okay.
Were you gonna ask something, Counselor Williams?
Yep, you would just ask.
Oh,
me-
okay.
We're on the same page there.
Okay, any other comments or questions before we move on off of the library? Okay. New discussion, new city hires. I know you and Dawn have been very busy.
Very
interviewing.
busy, very productive. We called 3 individuals back, and Gabriela Gonzalez is the person that we extended an offer to. Gabriella has an anthropology major. She comes from Independence. She graduated from Independence, and she even wrote a book that was in the Independence Museum that they use for fundraiser as a short stories about some of the haunted things that go on in Independence. They're apparently just like the
okay.
Pendleton Underground.
Right.
You're familiar with that.
Yeah.
And if you aren't, you really should go to Pendleton and go to the underground. It's just like it's an underground world that we used to be full of all sorts of things, like Portland does as well. But
So does Seattle.
yeah, Seattle, there's all sorts of interesting things. But anyway, she wrote a book about that. What we like about Gabriella is the fact that she has, number one, she has a lot of energy. But two, there are things that she can bring to the table besides the, we made it very clear. We spoke with her a little over 4 hours total between the interviews.
Wow.
Oh, wow.
So she knows us about as well as we know her, which is good.
Yeah.
But we made it very clear that yes, there are mundane things that have to be done. We have to, taking care of that front office and making sure that when Dawn is not available up front, that we have someone there that can do the basics of making sure the utility payments are being processed and taken care of. There's a face for the community. And those things, that continuity has to be there. And that way Dawn can be sick when she's sick.
Yeah.
And take a vacation when she needs to, and she's not, we just don't have one person up front. That also relieves the city administrator to do city administrator things without having to cover for the front office as well. So this is a rather important position, but it also gives us the ability to get other things done because she does have extensive writing capability. And I've assessed that she also has the ability to take complex things and put it into writing, and also, do the she clearly has research ability, clearly has good writing capability. So things such as compiling parks master plans, economic development plans, more than just typing things. She can actually help in doing that in her time when she's not, the calls don't come in all the time.
Yeah.
What do you do in the downtime?
Right.
In the past, that position has just simply been, well,
Right.
do something,
Yeah.
right?
It
But
is-
now we have other things that this person can do that would fit her talent set.
Is this the same finalist that we talked about recently that you said
Yes.
has
Yes.
a lot of public relations kind of a?
Public relations, she's been involved with foster homes
Okay.
and actually coordinating and building those. She's been a bartender. I've always enjoyed that because being a bartender is not,
It's not easy.
Not easy.
it's not an easy job, number one, and number two, it takes a huge amount of personal skills.
Yeah.
And I also asked her a great deal of questions about that, like what happens when it's closing and everyone needs to leave.
Yeah.
That's a tough one.
Yeah.
She has the technique down. I'm impressed.
So when does she start?
Thursday,
Oh,
Thursday at
really?
11 o'clock.
Thursday?
So
Thursday
she
at
accepted
11.
the offer?
Yes, she did.
Excellent.
Which we're doing we already did the reference checks
Yeah.
today. Dawn did that. And I got her on the checker, which we do our background checks.
Awesome. That's great news.
So Thursday is her start day. She'll be here 10 to 5 on Mondays and Tuesdays, and 11 to 4 Wednesdays, Thursdays, and Fridays.
Awesome. That's great news.
So that gives us an afternoon too, which is something that we've also wanted. Afternoons are better for that staffing position than mornings are. So we interviewed the finalists. We had 3 fantastic individuals,
Sweet.
but each had their own specialties and things to offer the city. And I think Gabriella gave us, the best opportunity to move other things forward.
Is she
that-
living in Independence currently?
No, she's
Okay.
living in South Corvallis.
Oh.
It's off Center Point. Actually, that's that new area that
Yeah.
off Robin.
Robin Hood.
Wake Robin.
Wake Robin.
Wake Water,
Yeah.
yeah,
That's
that
not
area.
Yeah,
15 mile, yeah, not very far away.
backside of the golf course.
Backside of the golf course,
Oh,
yes.
okay.
My daughter lived and her husband lived there for a while, so I'm familiar with the area.
Right on the.
Nice
Marys.
homes, they're nice apartments and nice everything.
Okay.
So we're very pleased. That was, we did spend a huge amount of time.
Mm.
I just wanted to make sure that she understood that along with your creativity and wanting to do that, there's other things that must be done.
Mhm.
And we will take advantage of that, absolutely. But the key job here is the front desk and making sure that everyone can do their jobs without having to do everything.
Yeah, that's great. That's so
So,
great
yeah.
that she's gonna start Thursday. That's
Yeah,
good
that
news.
is. Yeah, that was a bonus.
All right. Next on the agenda is city administrator recruiting. Would you like to update us on that?
Yeah,
Excellent,
so
thank you.
I emailed Prothman GMP in late December and they responded. Prothman GMP, for those who are not on the personnel committee meeting, is the recruitment firm that Steve recommended we work with. They specialize in recruiting for executive positions with small governances. I think specific to the Northwest.
They
think-
generally, they are everywhere, but
Okay.
they have most of their clientele in small cities throughout the Northwest.
Okay.
Small meaning Corvallis and smaller.
Okay. Yeah. So
let's.
Yeah.
Monroe is
Quantify that a little bit.
really
real small. And that was kind of what Greg Prothman said. He was very kind. First, we spoke on the phone and then he recapped what he said through email so that I could share it with the mayor.
Good.
Um,
He's very knowledgeable. I mean, if anything, that gives you a lot of information.
we
to
got
move
a,
forward.
and that, I think that was the really valuable part of the interaction with him is if we decide not to go through Prothman GMP, he gave us 3 other suggestions
Good.
for recruiting. So I'm going to make a recommendation to have our personnel committee meeting earlier than it's currently scheduled for. And so that we can hopefully meet by the end of this month to talk about the options that Greg suggested and the costs associated with recruiting for your replacement. As we've talked about before a few times, we really want to get somebody who is qualified and experienced in the areas that you outlined, but also to get them early enough that you guys can overlap and you can show them the
Well,
ropes.
I think the most important thing for the city really is to make sure you have a third party. do the
Yeah.
Regardless of who it is. I think Prothman's a great place to start because they're professional.
Yeah.
But there's other options, Council of Governments, both LCOG and OCWCOG in Albany have provided that service.
There's also a group in Eugene, and even though we're technically not part of Lane County,
Lane
Greg,
County will help us.
yeah, that was Greg's thinking too. So we've got a couple of different options throughout the
But
Willamette Valley
it's
in Oregon.
just important that you have a third party to guide you.
Yeah.
And not try to do it yourself, because this is one where the city has tried that in the past, and honestly,
Yeah.
Got bit.
yeah, I'll
Yeah.
let you say that.
So
What he
that's the
said.
update that we've got for the city
Excellent.
administrator
Good.
position.
That's
Very
promising.
good. Thank you.
Yeah.
Now we're down to the review of business from the December 16th council meeting. So we've got ordinance 2024-06, which is going to be a second reading establishing business permits. There's that. We've got declaring a council vacancy. So Councilor Rich did not accept his second term, so we'll be looking to fill that slot on the council. And then it looks like, well, hopefully we'll have approval for a city administrator recruitment plan of some sort. So,
Even if you simply just have a vote to move forward with a plan and say, you authorize Counselor Linder to do that. You don't need anything, a resolution.
nothing fancy.
Nothing fancy,
Yeah.
just council approval to move forward with the process.
Some documentation saying what we.
Yes, exactly,
Yeah.
exactly.
Oh, what was the date for that meeting?
For the personnel and finance?
For
Or-
the upcoming council meeting? Because I don't think.
January
it's-
27th.
Oh, yeah. Oh, you mean the January meeting? Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
May
Sorry.
I add, so I
Go
do
ahead.
have some other business, because former Counselor Rich has declined his position as a counselor for this term. We now also have a vacancy on the Personnel Committee, Finance and Personnel Committee, and I I don't remember what the process is. I know that you shared it before, but I would like to add at least one other person, if not two more people to that meeting.
So,
To that committee.
the mayor would do that after, you folks say we need to fill this. So, you can make recommendations. The mayor is the person who makes those appointments, but he
Okay.
has to do so at a council meeting.
Okay, got it. So there's my little, my
Yeah.
request.
Would it be smart for us to wait till we have the council vacancy filled? So there might be an opportunity there that we don't know about yet.
Well, we actually have someone that.
Yeah,
wants to
we
be on
have
it now.
somebody on the
Oh,
council who is interested.
Yeah.
Okay, I was
Um,
just making a.
But
point.
no, yeah, it's a great
That's
point.
fine.
We just, we need more than just the mayor and myself on the
Yeah.
committee.
yeah, yeah. I think we had 4 on there when I was on it. a
Yeah.
long time ago.
Yeah.
Okay.
So,
Any other business wish to discuss in the council meeting? No?
Usual updates, the mayor puts down all the updates that we update, and
Mhm.
those are the big things I have. I don't have any other resolutions at this point.
Do we have a
For
meeting coming up on the-
2025,
on
so-
Thursday?
I would love an update,
Thursday?
at the
Oh,
meeting, the
economic
next meeting on
development.
what's happening with
Yeah.
the lien
Okay.
that was.
Oh, actually, I had that on here and then I took it off. I'm sorry. The lien's been settled.
And we can save it for the next, for the city council.
It was settled for the cost of our attorney's fees plus the $1,000 penalty. And many reasons behind that, but the main reason was our attorney recommended that. The second part of it was that it was what we liened them was way more than what he was even receiving for the house.
Yeah.
So it would have stopped the sale altogether.
Got it.
And this seemed to be, you folks also, the third part of that was you folks said several times that you weren't after to get money.
Yeah.
You wanted the fact that you were upholding the rule of law of this town.
Yeah.
So
Got
we
it.
fined him $1,000. And he had to pay for all of our attorney's fees, which is over $6,000. And that was paid out of closing. We have the check and it's been put into the our court
Okay.
area, which is.
I recall
where-
this now. Thank you.
So we have all that resolved. The gentleman is now in Bay City up by Tillamook area. And gone, and we have new owners here who we have already reached out and are talking about getting a permit for their B and B. But doing so
Legally.
legally.
The correct way.
So we didn't really lose a business because they plan on doing the same
Yes, they
thing.
do,
Okay,
and-
good.
but do it within our permit system and everything else. And so we,
Well, we never had a business before when he didn't go through the.
well, you now do, and we have everything in place to make it work.
But that would be so
is-
exciting to
Yeah,
have.
Congratulations. I mean, that was a long process and at times,
Painful.
but it worked.
Yeah.
So that's great.
Awesome.
Does the fire marshal, fire chief have to go re-inspect?
They're gonna be going through a process now of redoing it. They have to get to Benton County to
Mm.
get a permit for occupancy. So the home has to have home occupancy. And that will include fire extinguishers,
Alarms. and stuff.
alarms and all that good stuff.
The signage for escapes and all. that.
Exactly.
Mhm.
And then we also get to be part of that as well.
Okay,
Got it.
So
Okay.
Cool.
it worked well.
good.
That's great.
Okay. Anything else?
Another thing we put on our website, we have hotel links.
Do
You
it.
ready?
No, it's a good, it's
It's
a
a good
good
thing.
step forward. It's a good step forward for the city. Yes.
Do it, Mayor.
Yeah.
We're done. All right, no more talking. Good night, everyone.
Violation.